They beat her, dragged her by the hair, and threw her into the freezing night, all because she fed a paralyzed beggar at the gate. What her evil stepmother and cruel stepsister didn't know was that the broken man they mocked was secretly the family lawyer, the only one who knew the hidden clause in the will. As the door slammed behind her and blood hit the ground, the beggar whispered one sentence that would destroy their inheritance forever. What happened when he finally opened the will would leave everyone, especially them, completely speechless. The iron gate screamed as it shut, the sound slicing through the silence like a verdict. Emily Carter lay on the gravel, her cheek pressed into cold stone, her breath coming out in ragged white clouds. Midnight swallowed the estate whole, the Carter house glowing behind the bars like a smug, living thing. Warm, lit, and very much not hers anymore. She tried to move. Pain answered first. Inside the house, Victoria Carter stood, perfectly still, listening. Her silk robe was immaculate, her expression carved from calm cruelty. She waited, not because she cared, but because humiliation was always best when it lingered. When no sound came from the gate, she smiled. "Lock it," Victoria said softly. Her daughter, Madison Carter, already had. Madison leaned against the door, pulse racing, cheeks flushed, not from fear, but from power. She loved this part. Loved the moment when Emily became nothing more than a story they could rewrite later. She deserved it, Madison said, louder than necessary. Sneaking food to some disgusting cripple like we're running a soup kitchen. Victoria turned, slow and deliberate. "Careful," she murmured. "We don't say cripple. We say liability." They laughed together, the sound floating through marble halls that still smelled faintly of Emily's cooking. That, more than anything, enraged Victoria. Even beaten and bleeding, Emily had left fingerprints. Everywhere. Order, warmth, quiet dignity. Things Victoria had spent a decade trying to erase. Outside, Emily forced herself onto one elbow. Her fingers shook, slick with blood. The gate loomed above her, taller now. Final. She didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears only fed them. Her mind slipped backward, uninvited. 10 years earlier, she had stood in this same driveway wearing black, clutching her father's arm as he buried her mother. She remembered Victoria's hand on his shoulder that day, comforting, gentle, already possessive. Emily had been 16 and stupid enough to believe adults when they smiled. Flashbacks layered over pain. Victoria moving in, temporarily. Madison taking Emily's room, just until things settled. The slow shift from family to burden. By the time her father suffered the stroke, Emily had already learned how gaslighting worked, how concern could sound like kindness while stripping you of oxygen. "Your father wouldn't want this stress," Victoria would say. "You're too emotional, Emily," Madison would add. "Be grateful we let you stay." Grateful. The word echoed now as Emily dragged herself closer to the gate, each movement deliberate, survival-focused. The night air bit into her bruises, but she welcomed it. Cold didn't lie. That's when she saw him. The beggar sat exactly where he always did, slumped in his wheelchair beneath the oak tree by the property line. His coat was thin, his hands curled inward like broken branches. His legs motionless, forgotten, just like they said. Emily had fed him for weeks, quietly, carefully, because kindness was the one thing Victoria hadn't beaten out of her yet. She managed to whisper, "I'm sorry." The beggar looked up. His eyes were sharp, too sharp. He took in the blood on her face, the torn sleeve of her sweater, the way she was bracing herself to stay conscious. Then his gaze flicked to the house, windows glowing like greedy eyes. "They hurt you," he said. Not a question. Emily nodded once. Talking felt dangerous. "For feeding me," she added. "I knew it would come to this." The beggar was silent for a long moment. The wind moved through the oak, carrying with it the distant echo of laughter from inside the house. Madison's laugh, high, careless. Then the beggar leaned forward, his voice dropping so low it barely carried. "They just made a very expensive mistake." Emily blinked. Pain blurred her vision, but something in his tone cut through it. Not pity, not gratitude. Certainty. "You don't understand," she said weakly. "They already won." The beggar smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, but like a man who had been waiting. "Oh," he whispered, "they haven't even begun to lose yet." Behind them, unseen by the women inside, a black sedan idled at the far end of the road. Headlights off, engine running. The night was not over. The black sedan's engine hummed like a held breath. Emily didn't notice it at first. Her vision tunneled, the world narrowing to the ache in her ribs and the strange gravity of the beggar's gaze. He was still watching the house, not her, as if memorizing it. Windows, angles, habits. Not like a victim, like a man inventorying a crime scene. "You should go," Emily whispered. "They'll come back if they think I'm still alive." The beggar finally looked at her. Then, really looked. His eyes softened, but his voice didn't. "They won't," he said. "They're too busy congratulating themselves." Inside the Carter house, that was exactly what was happening. Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, one she'd been saving. She raised it slightly, a silent toast to order restored. "I warned her," she said, reclining into the leather chair that had once been Emily's father's favorite. She chose defiance. Madison kicked off her heels and laughed, scrolling through her phone. "She'll come crawling back by morning. They always do." Victoria's smile thinned. "No, she won't." That certainty came from practice, from years of identifying breaking points and pushing just far enough. Emily had been resilient, annoyingly so, but tonight had been surgical. Violence plus humiliation plus exile. No safety net, no witnesses, no leverage. Or so Victoria believed. Outside, the beggar shifted in his wheelchair. The movement was subtle, but Emily saw it. Saw the way his hand suddenly steadied, the tremor vanishing. He reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a phone. Not old, not cracked. Modern. Expensive. Emily's heart skipped. Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. He pressed a button instead. "Get out," he said quietly into the phone. "Now." The sedan's headlights flicked on. Emily stared. Confusion battled exhaustion. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. Then, gently, but not yet. The car rolled closer, tires crunching softly over gravel. The driver stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored coat that did not belong in this cold or this place. He moved with purpose, eyes already scanning Emily's injuries. The beggar looked up at him. "Careful," he said. "She's concussed." The driver nodded immediately, respectfully. Emily's mouth fell open. "Sir," the driver said, addressing the beggar. "The hospital. Or no hospital," the beggar replied. "Too many questions. Take her to the townhouse." "Sir." That one word shattered something. Emily felt the world tilt as the driver knelt beside her, professional hands assessing, stabilizing. "It's okay, ma'am," he said. "We've got you." She looked back at the beggar, panic flaring. "I don't even know your name." He met her eyes. "You will," he said again. "And when you do, tonight will make sense." As they lifted her, her thoughts fractured into memories. Victoria standing over her father's hospital bed, whispering to doctors. Madison forging Emily's signature on school documents. The will that was never read aloud because Victoria claimed it was too painful. The will. Her father had been meticulous, paranoid even. He'd once joked, "If I die mysteriously, assume betrayal." Emily had laughed then. Now, strapped into the back seat, warmth creeping back into her limbs, the beggar's next words sliced through the haze. "Your father hired me 2 years before he died," he said calmly, "because he was afraid of them." Emily sucked in a sharp breath. "Hired you to do what?" "To make sure the truth survived him." The sedan pulled away from the gate just as the house lights flickered. Victoria moving through rooms, already rearranging the narrative. By morning, she'd tell neighbors Emily was unstable. By noon, she'd claim she'd run away. By nightfall, she'd believe it, herself. The beggar watched the estate shrink behind them. "My name is Richard Hale," he said. "I'm a corporate attorney, trust and estates." Emily's pulse roared in her ears. "And I wrote the clause they never thought to look for." Silence swallowed the car. Richard's voice lowered, heavy with satisfaction restrained by discipline. "Your father anticipated exactly this scenario. Abuse, expulsion, retaliation." Emily's hands curled into fists despite the pain. "Then why didn't you stop them?" "Because," Richard said, "the clause only activates when they cross a line they can't undo." He finally smiled then, cold, precise. "Tonight," he added, "they crossed it." The car turned onto the main road, disappearing into the dark. Behind them, the Carter house stood tall and confident, unaware that every luxury inside it now had an expiration date. And inside Victoria's chest, though she didn't know it yet, a countdown had already begun. The townhouse sat on the edge of the city's historic district, narrow and unassuming from the outside, the kind of place no one noticed twice. Inside, however, it was quiet in a way that felt intentional, as though every sound had been measured and approved in advance. The sedan rolled into the private garage, and the door closed behind them with a soft, mechanical certainty that made Emily realize how exposed she had been her entire life. The driver helped her inside, laying her gently on a leather sofa that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The pain in her body remained, but the panic loosened its grip. For the first time that night, she felt contained rather than discarded. Richard Hale removed his coat and folded it carefully over a chair. The movement was slow, deliberate, and deeply incompatible with the image Victoria and Madison had laughed at for weeks. No shaking hands, no helpless slouch. Even seated, he carried authority like gravity. "You showed him mercy," Richard said, pouring water into a glass and handing it to Emily. "That mattered." Emily took a careful sip. "They said he was nothing," she replied. "That helping him made me weak." Richard's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "People who confuse cruelty with strength always say that. Your father knew better." The mention of her father opened a wound sharper than the bruises. "He trusted them," Emily said. "He trusted her." "He trusted you," Richard corrected calmly. "That is why the clause exists." He wheeled himself toward a desk in the corner of the room. The motion was smooth, practiced. Emily noticed it then, really noticed it, and the pieces clicked together with unsettling clarity. His paralysis was real, but it had never been his vulnerability. It had been his camouflage. Richard opened a locked drawer and removed a thick folder bound in dark red leather. He placed it on the desk with a weighty finality, as if setting down a verdict. "This is the Carter family trust," he said. "It controls the house, the investments, the offshore accounts, and the charitable foundations Victoria loves to parade for social credibility." Emily's jaw tightened. She said everything was left to her outright. "She lied," Richard replied evenly, "repeatedly, confidently, poorly. He opened the folder, pages whispering like restrained secrets. Your father amended the trust after his stroke. Once he realized how isolated you had become, he feared retaliation if the changes were discovered prematurely, so he added a conditional execution clause. Emily's heart pounded. What kind of condition? Richard looked at her, making sure she was fully present for what came next. Any act of physical harm, forced eviction, or documented emotional abuse against you, committed by a beneficiary or their agent, would trigger an immediate forfeiture of all benefits. Emily stared at him. All? All, he confirmed. Assets revert to the protected party. That is you. The room felt suddenly smaller, heavier with possibility. They beat me, Emily said slowly. They threw me out. And they did it on camera, Richard added. Her breath caught. What camera? Richard tapped a button on the desk. A monitor flickered to life, displaying the Carter estate gate from multiple angles. The audio was unmistakable. Victoria's voice, sharp and controlled. Madison's laughter, shrill and intoxicated with power. The impact of fists, the sound of the gate slamming shut. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth. Your father installed the system after the stroke, Richard said. Victoria never noticed because she never looked for anything that didn't benefit her. Flashbacks rushed in uninvited, Victoria insisting on controlling the finances because it was too stressful for Emily. Madison mocking her for keeping old paperwork, the way they always acted certain that nothing could touch them. How long have you had this? Emily asked. Since the night your father died, Richard replied. He made me promise to wait. He said people like Victoria expose themselves eventually if you let them believe they are winning. Emily let out a shaky breath that sounded dangerously close to laughter. So what happens now? Richard closed the folder. Now we follow procedure. Tomorrow morning, I file notice of execution. A temporary injunction freezes every account. By noon, Victoria and Madison will be unable to access funds, property, or credit. And the house? Legally yours, Richard said. They are occupants without rights. Emily pictured Victoria standing in that living room, wine glass raised, believing herself untouchable. The image twisted into something sharp and satisfying. They'll say I provoked them, Emily said. They always do. They can try, Richard replied. Gaslighting works, best when there are no records. Unfortunately for them, your father anticipated their playbook. He leaned back, studying her. The clause also mandates a public reading of findings if abuse is verified. That includes medical reports, video evidence, and financial misconduct uncovered during the freeze. Emily's pulse quickened. Public? Board members, attorneys, social circles, Richard said. Everyone whose respect they've been borrowing. A long silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of consequences. Emily felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest, something that was not fear and not pain. Control. Outside, dawn crept toward the city, pale and inevitable. Somewhere across town, Victoria Carter slept soundly, convinced the problem had been removed. She had no idea she was about to become the example. Morning arrived without mercy. Victoria Carter discovered it first when her credit card declined at the cafe she frequented every day, the one where staff greeted her by name and admired her jewelry like it was part of the decor. She laughed at first, a soft, dismissive sound, meant to signal inconvenience, not alarm. She tried another card, then another. Each decline landed harder than the last, drawing glances that felt suddenly less admiring and more curious. By the time she returned to the house, irritation had curdled into something sharper. Madison was already there, pacing the marble foyer, phone pressed to her ear, her voice pitched too high. "What do you mean the account is frozen?" she snapped. There has to be a mistake. My mother. She stopped when she saw Victoria's face. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Before either of them could speak, the doorbell rang. Not the polite chime they were used to, but a firm, official press that carried weight. Victoria straightened her posture instinctively, smoothing her robe as she opened the door. Richard Hale sat in his wheelchair on the front step, impeccably dressed, a leather portfolio resting on his lap. Behind him stood two attorneys, a process server, and a uniformed officer. Across the street, neighbors slowed, curiosity already sharpening. "Victoria Carter," Richard said evenly, his voice carrying just enough to travel. "I'm here to execute the Carter family trust." Victoria's mouth tightened. "You," she said, recognition dawning too late. "The beggar." Richard did not react to the insult. "That word," he replied calmly, "is about to cost you everything." Emily stepped into view then, walking slowly but steadily, bruises still visible, posture unbroken. A low murmur rippled through the gathered onlookers. Madison's face drained of color. "You weren't supposed to come back," Madison whispered. Emily met her gaze without flinching. "You didn't give me a choice." They moved inside. Victoria tried to protest, to assert authority, but procedure did not care about her tone. The attorneys took seats at the dining table where Emily had once eaten standing up, waiting for permission. Richard opened the red leather folder and began to read. He did not rush. He detailed the clause, line by line, each word precise, unavoidable. The definition of abuse, the conditions for forfeiture, the evidence list, video timestamps, medical reports, financial discrepancies that had quietly accumulated under Victoria's stewardship. With every sentence, the room seemed to shrink. Madison tried denial first, laughing sharply and shaking her head, insisting Emily had always been unstable. Then came anger, accusations thrown wildly, claims of provocation and disrespect. When those failed, she cried, collapsing into a chair, mascara streaking as she begged her mother to fix it. Victoria said nothing. Her silence was not dignity. It was calculation unraveling. She had built her power on perception, on the assumption that no one was watching closely enough to challenge her. Now every move she had made was being recited back to her, like a confession she didn't remember giving. "The trust is hereby executed," Richard concluded, "effective immediately." The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Victoria, "you and your daughter have 48 hours to vacate the property." Madison surged to her feet. "This is insane. That house is ours." Emily spoke then, her voice steady and audible to everyone present. "You told me to be grateful you let me stay. It turns out you were the guests." Victoria finally looked at her. Really looked. Not as a burden, not as a problem to be managed, but as the woman standing on the other side of consequence. For the first time, she had no leverage left to pull. The reading did not end there. Richard continued, as mandated, into the section detailing public disclosure. Emails were summarized, board members named, charitable funds misallocated under Victoria's signature. The carefully curated image she had worn like armor cracked audibly with each revelation. By the time the folder closed, the silence was absolute. Emily walked to the front door and opened it wide. Morning light flooded the room, exposing everything that had once hidden comfortably in shadow. "You should go," Emily said, not loudly, not cruelly. "You don't live here anymore." Madison hesitated, searching for something, anything to hold on to. Victoria moved first, lifting her chin as if pride could still protect her. It couldn't. They passed through the door under the watchful eyes of neighbors who would talk for years. When the house was finally empty, Emily stood alone in the foyer. The air felt different. Honest. Richard watched her quietly. "Your father would be proud," he said. Emily exhaled, a long breath she felt she had been holding since childhood. "He taught me to be kind," she replied. "He also taught me to pay attention." Outside, the gate stood open. This time, it was her choice who passed through it.